Welcome to all our listeners to The Great Sources, Season 2, Episode 15, called Is Redemption Really Dependent on Us? We continue our divine quest to determine whether it is appropriate and under what circumstances it might be appropriate for us to live in Eretz Yisrael. So, as we always do, I'm going to quickly review last week's shir. In last week's shir, in brief, we discussed the fact that while one can indeed find hints and allusions in Midrashim, and when I say hints and allusions, I don't mean in any way to minimize it. You can in fact find these ideas, discover them, put them together in a compelling way. Allusions to the Cheshbonos of Hashem, to Hashem's plan, as it were, and how long things have to take, how long we're supposed to be in Galus, things like that. So while one can indeed find them, reasons for being in Galus and also indications of how long we're supposed to be in Galus, while that is doable, that is not, in my opinion, the way that we are supposed to determine activity or action. Because if we are supposed to be in Galus, then we will be in Galus. And we will be in Galus means we will be unable to get back Eretz Yisrael. As we discussed in the past, to say Gzeras Galus, while there is the ability to pick up on a plane and move to Eretz Yisrael, is just doesn't make any sense. So similarly, although there are Hashem's Cheshbonos, there's reasons to be in Galus, and we can figure out the Cheshbonos, and we can figure out some calculations about how long we're supposed to be in Galus, that's not the path to take to figure out to determine the correct action. Rather, the correct path to take is to A, see what the Torah says about how important Eretz Yisrael is, and B, there's the concept of the Shalosh Shavuos, which is the warning against attempting to take back Eretz Yisrael before it will succeed, and before the world is ready for that, which will end up in great danger. So, which means ultimately, what we are supposed to determine is whether we are physically, practically, able and safely to take Eretz Yisrael. That's the only question. If we can, that indicates that the Gzeras Galus is over, that the reasons for Galus are over, etc. Because when Hashem has a reason to exile us, He does so. And when you say He does so, it means to say He causes that we can't be in Eretz Yisrael. That's how He did it in the past, and that's how it was ongoing for the last thousands of years. And if that's over, and we discussed that I think it is over, meaning we could actually go to Eretz Yisrael, so that no longer becomes a guide to suggest that we shouldn't go to Eretz Yisrael. Naturally. So today what we're going to talk about is the Sefer HaKuzari, Yehuda Halevi. And this is something we mentioned many times in the past. Now we're going to jump into it and discuss it further. Yehuda Halevi actually calls upon, this is 1,000 years ago about, Yehuda Halevi, a little less really, Yehuda Halevi calls upon all of us, the whole people of Yisrael, to return to Eretz Yisrael. That's what we're going to talk about today and the sources for that. Before I talk about that, I just want to remind everyone about my new podcast that I'm doing together with Mikey Stone, a conversation on the weekly parsha. It's called The Book of Memories. Highly recommended. Wonderful conversations related to the parsha. The coming episode, which is going to post the beginning of the week of Parsha Shlach. So it's a few days from now. That episode is about Parsha Shlach. It's about the Meraglim, and it's about Eretz Yisrael. So it's a very, very important discussion for understanding on a deeper level what Eretz Yisrael is about. But it is something that I'm going to get to in this series too. So let's jump right in. I owe you one thing, which is at the end of last year I mentioned a source, and I realized as I mentioned it that I didn't prepare to look it up and make sure I had it all right, and that was from Reb Tzaddik. Reb Tzaddik said the following, and I said it a little bit differently than Reb Tzaddik says it. This is in Tzidkas HaTzadik Siman Mem Vav. In the context of the Mapilim were those who, after the Meraglim, were told, okay, you messed up, and now we have to be in the desert for 40 years. So there were people who said, no, you know what, we actually are ready to go. Hinenu v'alinu ki chatonu, we recognize that we sinned, and now we're ready to go. And Moshe Rabbeinu told them, Al talu ki ein Hashem bekir b'chem v'lo sinag k'fu l'fnei oivechem Lama ze atem over mespi Hashem v'hi lo sitzlach. V'hi lo sitzlach. So what I said was that you see from that pasuk that v'hi lo sitzlach is a condition for Lama ze atem over mespi Hashem, meaning that if Hashem doesn't want you to go to Eretz Yisrael, it won't succeed. And if it would succeed, then that means Hashem wants you to go. And there's never a command, don't go to Eretz Yisrael. Hashem never told us that. Hashem made it either impossible or unsafe, which is what the Shavuos are about, unsafe for us as a nation to go to Eretz Yisrael. And that's what I said last week. I said was that's captured in that pasuk. Ultimately, it's the success or failure of that project, which is the key to determining whether it's appropriate. Can there a borrow? That's what I said. Now I said there. Rav Tzaddik said a little different. Rav Tzaddik said he's medayik v'hi. He's like this midrashic, this drasha, like which you can question. Meaning, I believe what I'm saying is pshuta shel mikra. The pasuk says, "Don't do it." You're lamazat Hashem. Think about it. If someone's eating a piece of chazir, you don't tell him why you're doing that. It's an avera, and it won't fill you up. That's what it's like. Or you're not gonna, right? You're not gonna get nutrition from it. First of all, he will. And second of all, it doesn't matter whether he will or won't. It's an avera. So that's my diak, that the avera of going to Eretz Yisrael is only an avera to the extent that it won't work. There's never an avera to go to Eretz Yisrael except that it's not going to work, and that's the way Hashem telling you don't do it. That's what it means. It's built in not to do it because it's going to have to succeed. When I said I didn't mean to say Hashem is sending you some divine message. That's how Hashem makes it impossible for you to go, by making it impossible. Rabbi Tzaddik says the following: Vehi this time it won't succeed, but the day will come where it will succeed. It's a good idea, Eitzahi. But it's a wonderful idea that you guys have. Take Eretz Yisrael, storm it, take it by force. But it won't succeed. It won't succeed. The day will come that this will succeed, which is when, says Reb Tzaddik, Zmanenu zeh shehu E15. Really very interesting that he says there will be a time where us retaking Eretz Yisrael on our own initiative will be successful, and that is medayik from Vehilis. That gets us to the same point, which is that ultimately it will succeed, that it's appropriate. But what I'm saying is, I think Pshuta Shel Mikra, he's saying this drasha that there is a time that it will succeed. Okay, now what I want to get to is I want to get to the following for today's discussion. So we discussed that there's reasons for galus, certainly, and there's a cheshbon that if we reject Eretz Yisrael, then we actually have to be in galus for a certain amount of time until we can try again to do it so correctly, let's call it. And that's why the Bavliim, who were supposed to come back in the beginning of Ayasheni, the time came where once they missed their window of opportunity of returning, they were no longer welcome in Eretz Yisrael. And so we spoke that there's two levels of that. One level is that if you don't embrace Eretz Yisrael, then you need a time to re-educate yourself before you try again. And what we also spoke about is that on a practical level, how do we know if we're there? Are we supposed to be Bali Ruach HaKodesh to understand where the people are holding? The answer is no. In the case of the Bavliim and in the case of anyone afterwards, it was unsafe for them to return. All the Bavliim couldn't return to Etzol because that would have been Aliyah B'Chayma. So the whole nation wasn't supposed to be in Etzol. Some people were, some people weren't. Well, who shouldn't be and who shouldn't? Well, the Bavliim, since they missed their opportunity, they were expected to stay away. Okay, that was Bekitzer, we spoke about next time, last year, and we spoke about also that it was a decree of 1,000 years, and after 1,000 years, like clockwork, comes Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, the prophet, so to speak, of the return to Eretz Yisrael, and basically says, in so many words, that the whole people should be returning to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, this is in Maimer Sheni, Siman Chaf Daled, Chav Kim Chaf Daled, where the king, after the Chavar describes to the king Hagar Eretz Yisrael, as the king says, well then, if that's the case, then you, the people, are guilty for not making Eretz Yisrael your place of your life and death, and not embracing it fully. And the Chavar says, you got me, you're right. And he tells them the following thing, and this is what I'm going to focus on. So at that point, he says, you got me. Meaning, we should, in fact, all of us, the people of Yisrael, we should, in fact, be making Eretz Yisrael the place where we live and die, making it our country in practice. And Rabbi Yehuda Levi, the Chaver there, continues and says that this chait, the chait of not embracing Eretz Yisrael fully, is what caused that the Shechinah didn't return in Bayis Sheni, as was promised, Rani v'simchi bas tzion, kineni ba v'shachanti b'seichech. And then he continues and says, had they all returned, the Shechinah would have come back, basically, is what he's saying. It's the sin that they didn't all return which caused that the Shechinah didn't come back in Bayis Sheni, and had they all come back from Bavel, the Shechinah would have returned. And he continues and says that as a rule, this is so important, this one we'll focus on today, but Baker, the Davar ha'alaki, meaning our connection with God, is chal on the person to the degree that we prepare ourselves for it. To the degree that we as a people are miskoinein and prepared to meet Elikei Avosenu, the kavanah tahira, to that degree he would come and reveal himself to us and be available to us. And so what he's saying is that it's wrong to be fatalist and say whatever's happening to us as a people is due to what Hashem wants, and who knows what Hashem wants. No. I tell you exactly, says I know exactly what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to come prepare the kavanah tahira to meet Him. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do you do that? If you're wondering that, you're asking the right question. That's the question we should all be asking. And I'll talk about that a little more in some further issue when we talk about like what Eretz Yisrael is all about, like exactly what this means. But the Rikud I want to focus on today is that Rabbi Yehuda Levi is saying that ultimately it's all up to us. And to say like, oh, Hashem decreed we should be in Galus and what can we do about it is wrong. It's us, it's we who have to embrace Eretz Yisrael specifically, and that's anchors the whole return, the whole Gula. Our embrace of Eretz Yisrael, and that's how the Sefer ends, as we mentioned. Yushalayim lo yisiboneh, until we all desire its avanim and afar. And it's that embrace of the Shechinah's return, epitomized by our coming back to Eretz Yisrael and taking Eretz Yisrael, wanting to be in Eretz Yisrael, that is what is going to bring back, in fact, the Shechinah. So this is something that in the past, I told I'm going to talk about this, former Barichos, this shtickle of Rabbi Yehuda Levi, and now the time has come. The question I'm going to focus on is as follows. The Gemara in Yuma Daf Tesam Beis, if in the source sheet, this is number 3. The Gemara in Yuma Daf Tesam Beis, which is undoubtedly the source for Rabbi Yehuda Levi, tells us this fact, that the reason why the Shechinah didn't return in the Bayis Sheni was because not everyone came back from Bavel. The thing is that the Gemara has this as a machlekes Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yechon. Rish Lakish was swimming in the Yardi, but before that, I should mention the Gemara earlier clearly talks about the Shechinah. No, actually, we can start right here. Rish Lakish was swimming in the Yarden. Rish Lakish was mad. So along came Rabbi Bachana, gave him a hand, and Rish Lakish said, "By God, I hate you, Bavliim. I don't want anything to do with you, Bavliim, because it's because of you that the Shechinah didn't come back in Bayis Sheni. Im chayma hi nivna aleha tiras kesef. Had Bnei Yisrael come back, had you made yourself like a wall and come up all together, yachad, from Bavel, during the building of Bayis Sheni, along with Bimei Ezra, she says. So because of you, had you all come back, the Shechinah would have returned, and therefore I hate you. Now, what does it mean the Shechinah didn't return? But look in the Gemara, then you'll see that means, and that's in the source sheet there too, that means that Nevuah ended. When we say the Shechinah wasn't shown by Sheni, that means something very specific. Of course it means something specific, but I can tell you specifically what it means. It means Nevuah stopped. Okay? Nevuah stopped 40 years into Bayis Sheni. We must have mentioned this in the past, I think. Rabbi Yehuda Levi says even the first 40 years of Bayis Sheni was still inspired by the Shechinah that was shown in the Bayis Rishon, Chagas Chayim Malachi, which is actually, a Medrash says that. Okay, Ein Kamakom. The point is, Bayis Sheni was not a bias of Nevuah. Why? Because the people didn't all return. Rish Lakish came to Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan told him, Lav Hainu Taima. That's not the reason that the Shechinah didn't come back in Bayis Sheni. Even if they would have all come back to Eretz Yisrael, the Shechinah wouldn't have been Shira. And that's because the Beis HaMikdash was built not by a descendant of Shem, but rather by a descendant of Yefes. In Yafta Lakim Yefes Yishkim B'alei Shem, Hashem will expand Yefes's boundaries, his lands. V'yishkain B'alei Shem, and Hashem will only dwell in the tents of Shem. Beis HaMikdash was built by a descendant of Yefes, Kairosh the Persian. And therefore, the Shechinah will not dwell in that house. Okay. So my question is, here, Rabbi Yehuda Levi says that the central chait of the people is that we're not returning to Eretz Yisrael. Because that's all Hashem wants from us. Hashem wants us to embrace Him, as it were, and if we want to and are willing to, and show our willingness to and take that step, then He will reveal Himself and come to our aid. That's Yehuda Levi's model of understanding the Torah. And he says, look, that's what happened to Bayis Sheni. They didn't all return when they should have, and because of that, the Shechinah didn't dwell in the Bayis Sheni. And the same thing applies forever. So my question is, yeah, well, that's what Rish Lakish says. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, we could have all come back to Bayis Sheni and it wouldn't have helped. So the question is, how could Rabbi Yehuda Levi say that the way the Davar Laki works, meaning the way the connection between us and Hashem works, is that Hashem waits for us to embrace Him? That's what Rish Lakish says, yes, but clearly Rabbi Yochanan holds differently, because Rabbi Yochanan says we could have all come back to Eretz Yisrael and it wouldn't have helped. It means we could have all done everything we wanted to, all done everything in our power, and yet the Shechinah wouldn't return. Suggesting that this idea that the Davar Laki waits for us, the Etzem, that's the way the Davar Laki is misyachis to its people, to Klal Yisrael. The Davar Laki, which means a connection with us and Hashem. The way that's misyachis is by waiting for us to embrace it, seems to be a machlekes. Not only does it seem to be a machlekes, it's machlekes Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, and when there's machlekes Rish Lakish, it's like Rabbi Yochanan. So is the Kuzari going like Rish Lakish over here specifically? And if he is only going like Rish Lakish, well, who says Rish Lakish is right? Maybe Rabbi Yochanan is right. That's what I'd like to know. Now, without going into the question of whether the rules of what the halacha is, could apply in this case, I want to suggest first the following. What I'm going to show you today, hopefully we'll get there, I hope there's enough time. I think there will be. I want to show you that actually everyone agrees to the Kuzari's model, even Rabbi Yochanan. But before we go there, I would like to suggest a possible understanding of Yehuda Levi, that he's actually going like Rish Lakish. And he actually holds Rish Lakish is correct here, and even though Rabbi Yochanan argues on Rish Lakish. And that's because there's other people that hold like Rish Lakish. Number one, we have Reb Sheila. In the Medrash Shechinah, which I spoke about this Medrash, when Reb Zeir went to Eretz Yisrael, there was a shopkeeper. Reb Zeir went to Eretz Yisrael, and there was a shopkeeper that was very nasty to him on account of him being a Bavli. And Reb Zeir was very insulted, and he said, why are my forefathers any less prestigious than his? He went to the Beis Medrash and he heard Reb Sheila saying, had all the Bavlim come up in Me'ezer like a Chayma, the Shechinah wouldn't have, the Bayis Sheni would not have been destroyed. So Reb Sheila also holds like Rish Lakish, that the perfect bias was really waiting to happen and was contingent on everyone coming back. Okay, so maybe the Kuzari is going like Rish Lakish because Reb Sheila is like him and Rabbi Yochanan is a Yachid. And I want to show you someone else who holds like Rish Lakish. It's a little bit complicated, but it's kedai to explore this. The Medrash in Shashim Rabbah on the pasuk, I think it's on the pasuk in Mechayim Mahi. Yes, it's Shashim Ches Tes. There's also a machlokes over there between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel ben Achmeini, and they're arguing about the pasuk in Devarim, which is number 7 in the source sheet. I'm skipping it here; it's a little bit out of order. Pasuk in Devarim says that when you're going to go into Teichachan Kisava, v'nosan Hashem lecha sham lev ragoz v'chilyoin einayim v'da'avoin nofesh. Hashem will give you there in Galus a lev ragoz, a heart prone to anger. And kilyoin einayim means hoping for things that can't be done, or can't be the way you want them to be. And da'avoin nofesh means depression or sadness. So the pasuk says that when you're in Golus, you're going to be affected psychologically in these ways. You're going to have a leiv ragas, killing enayim medavi nafesh. So now the pasuk says, "V'nosan Hashem lecha sham." Says Rabbi Yochanan, the leiv ragas is there, but when you come back to Eretz Yisrael, I'm sorry, the opposite. Rabbi Yochanan says you get a leiv ragas in Bavel, in Golus, and when you come back, you bring your leiv ragas with you. You bring your bad midas with you. And Shmuel ben Achmeni says no. Nasan Hashem lecha sham leiv ragas. But once you come back, you're nisrape. So Shmuel ben Achmeni says that the midas that you get from Golus get undone when you come back to Eretz Yisrael. Now I want to show you that according to Shmuel ben Achmeni, then the Shechinah should have been Shayrim by Sheni. How do we all come back? The Shechinah would have been Shayrim. How do I know that? Because, like this, the Gemara in Yuma is talking about why the Shechinah is not Shayrim by Sheni, which we said means why was there no Nevuah during by Sheni? Now, in order to understand the Gemara, what the Gemara is about, you have to first have an answer to the question of why is there no Nevuah in Golus? Because what the Gemara is discussing is how come that didn't change when they came back. So first we have to talk about why is there no Nevuah in Golus. Now what the Rambam says in the Moreh Nevuchim, Chelik Beis Perek Lamed Vav, the Rambam says that the reason why there's no Nevuah in Golus is because for Nevuah you have to have a healthy Koyach HaMedameh. That means a healthy ability to generate images in your mind for ideas. We're not going into the Rambam's theory of Nevuah now, it's not relevant. What the Rambam says is the following. He says this is undoubtedly the reason, the essential and immediate cause that Nevuah left ceased during Golus. Because there's no greater atzvus or atzvus that a person has when he's an eved who's purchased and meshubid to fools that are avari, and that combine absolute lack of true knowledge with perfection and animalistic desire. So again, the Rambam says that the reason why we lose Nevuah during Golus is because we have atzvus and atzvus. And atzvus, laziness and sadness. And that comes from the fact that we're avodim, meshubadim to fools. Rambam says that's absolutely clear because the kli, the instrument, the tool for prophecy is the koyach HaMedameh, is the imaginative faculty, the ability to have true images and correct and robust images. And Rambam says that's also the reason that Nevuah is going to return L'Moshe Mashiach. Mary Gala, as he promised. So what the Rambam is telling us is that the reason why there's no Nevuah in Galus is because in Galus we get certain midas, specifically atzlus and atzvus. Now, where does it say that we get atzlus and atzvus in Galus? V'nasan Hashem l'cha sham leiv ragos. Leiv ragos is anger. Kilyon einayim v'davar nafesh. Kilyon einayim means when you want something and you can't do anything about it. That's what causes atzlus in Galus. The inability to put into effect what we want and what we believe is correct because we're enslaved. And davei nafesh is atzvus. The reason why the Rambam doesn't say kas is because the pasuk doesn't say Hashem is going to make you angry. The pasuk says Hashem is going to give you a heart that's prone to anger. Hashem will give you a heart that's prone to anger and kilyon einayim davei nafesh. Kilyon einayim davei nafesh are states of mind. You will be in the state of mind of not being able to affect what you believe in. You'll be in a state of mind of davei nafesh. So that's what Rambam says is atzvus and atzvus. There's no constant state of anger, so you can't have nevuah when you're angry. But the pasuk doesn't say that you're in Golus you will be angry. It says you'll be prone to anger. Okay, now what's my point? My point is then that if you have a conversation Yuma Daf Tesam and Beis about how come there's no nevuah in Bayesheni, that's really a question of like this, according to the Rambam. I understand why there's no nevuah in Golus because it's atzvus and atzvus. But why didn't we lose the atzvus and atzvus when we came back to Eretz Yisrael? So then when the Gemara talks about what would it have taken for the Shechinah to come back, it means what would it take to lose the atzvus and atzvus? Rish Lakish says all it takes is to come back and we lose it. Rabbi Yochanan says no, we're still under the Persians. The Persians still have control, they actually in fact have control of the bias. So we can't lose the Golus Midas. Which means, and what's my point, that when Shmuel ben Achmeni says in the Medrash that by coming back to Eretz we would lose the leiv ragos, right? That's the pasuk. If he says we can lose the leiv ragos and then the killing naim daven nafesh, the atzos that go along with that. We can lose. We can be misrapes, is the way he says it. When we come back to Eretz Yisrael, then he holds like Rish Lakish. That coming back to Eretz Yisrael is the key. Was the only thing we needed to do. So then, not only do we have a Pshela holds like Rish Lakish, but Shmuel Achmeni, the great Balagada, also holds like Rish Lakish. So maybe the Kuzari is going like Rish Lakish, not like a Shechinah. Now, just one word I want to say though is that you might know that I'm working now with the Rambam's theory of Nevuah, that Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz are not essential conditions of Nevuah. It's not an essential condition of Nevuah that won't be in Eretz Yisrael, but it's rather a reality that when a person's in Galus, he has atzos and atzvos, and therefore he can't attain Nevuah. So fine, according to the Rambam, the question of whether you can come back and lose Yilei Vragos is mamish the question. But according to Yehuda Levi's Shita of Nevuah, as you might know, we discussed this in the past, is that Nevuah is associated with Eretz Yisrael in a more lucky way, meaning Hashem has his rules, which are beyond science, cannot be explained naturally. And that's why you have to be in Eretz Yisrael. So now, according to Yehuda Levi, the question of whether coming back from Golus, whether we lose the bad midas or not, is not the question of Nevuah. But I think it is. Because even according to Yehuda Levi, in order to have Nevuah, you have to be in Eretz Yisrael. According to Rish Lakish, all it took was to be in Eretz Yisrael. According to Rabbi Yochanan, he had to be in Eretz Yisrael independent of the Persians. So I think that even according to Yehuda Levi, the Shita of Shmuel Bar Achmeni, that we can come back to Eretz Yisrael and lose the bad midas of atzos and atzos, means we can lose the Golas effects, and we can get back being Eretz Yisrael kind of people, and therefore having Nevuah. So therefore, again, Shmuel Bar Achmeni comes down on the side of Rish Lakish. In the Shita of Yehuda Levi and Nevuah, it's not so much. It's not negay Nedu so much. I want to just mention also briefly. This is in source sheet number 8, and then we're going to get to the real answer. I think of how Rabbi Yochanan really also holds that everything depends on us. But I want to mention briefly that this medrash that says, it's machlekes whether when we came back to Eretz Yisrael we brought with us the bad midas from Galus or not. Meaning, Shmuel Bar Achmeni says, Sham leiv ragos, when you come back you leave it behind, and Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you bring it with you. Very, very important medrash, as we said, because bad midas is what Nevuah is all about, according to the Rambam, and even according to Yehuda Levi, we have to be Eretz Yisrael dik, we have to be Eretz Yisrael type. And the question is the midas that Galus taught us, can we undo them? It's a very, very important question. Or are we bringing it with us? It's a very important question in terms of are we reconnecting to Eretz Yisrael. But anyways, I want to mention that it's a stira, apparently a stira, and I'm not going to go into the answer today, because it's not relevant to us. It's a stira to the Gemara in Nedarim, Daf Chof Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara in Nedarim says, Ula, when he was coming back to Eretz Yisrael, he was together with two people. One of them on the way slaughtered his friend, and Rabbi Yochanan, when he heard about this, was shocked. He said, the pasuk says, V'nasan Hashem l'cha sham leiv ragos in Bavel. How's such a thing that a person could viciously and cruelly slaughter his friend? And Ula told him, when this event happened on my way to Eretz Yisrael, we hadn't yet crossed the Yarden River, we were still in Chutz La'aretz. So Rabbi Yochanan said, okay, fine, that's why it happened in Bavel. So this is stira to the Medrash, where it has Rabbi Yochanan as being the one who holds that the Leiv Ragos comes back with you. And if it would just be a stira to the Medrash, okay, Habatzar, maybe it's a different version, but it's actually a stira to Rabbi Yochanan in Yuma, because Rabbi Yochanan in Yuma says that we cannot all come back to Eretz Yisrael and just expect the Shechinah to return. And as we explained, that means we're bringing Galus, we're bringing Atzos and Atzvos with us. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say in Nedarim that, people shouldn't be so vicious in Eretz Yisrael because of V'nasan Hashem l'cha sham leiv ragos. That's Shmuel Bar Achmeni's Shita. There's an answer for this which I don't want to go into because it's not negated to us, but it's important to Ha'ara. It's a related Ha'ara. Okay, so now what I want to get back to is the root question here. The real question that we're starting with is, so this model of everything depends on us. All we need to do is just run to Eretz Yisrael, embrace Eretz Yisrael top to bottom, in the right way, of course, and then our Shechinah will return. This is what Yehuda Levi is advocating for. And I want to know that it seems to be a machlekes, and therefore I wonder, what does Rabbi Yochanan hold? Does he argue with this? And who's correct? So the truth is like this. The truth is, Mashenir Bazeh Borer, is that even Rabbi Yochanan is moide to Rabbi Yehuda Levi's model that everything's up to us, meaning we determine our destiny and our relationship with Hashem. And I want to explain how I know that. When Rabbi Yochanan said, okay, the Shechinah didn't return because that house was built by Koresh, Rish Lakish says the Shechinah doesn't return because we didn't all come back. Now there's a very major problem with this Gemara, which is that I have a completely different reason why the Shechinah didn't return, which is attested in other sources. And that's because they were mevatel the Yitzud Avodah Zarah. Remember the Gemara in Yud Daf Samach Tesam Beis talks about Ansheis Knesset Gedolah putting an end to the Yitzud Avodah Zarah. Meaning when they came back to Bayis Sheni, they said, this is why the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Because of Avodah Zarah. We don't want to have that inclination anymore. We're afraid we're going to just do it again. So they mevatel the Yitzud Avodah Zarah. It was given to them, given in their hands from Shemayim. And they mevatel that Yitzra, and they actually even were halfway mevatel Yitzud Arayas, and we changed everything. Changed Judaism forever. Or at least for a long time. Now, the mevatel Yitzud Avodah Zarah, the Seder Olam says, what I want to show you now is that when the mevatel Yitzud Avodah Zarah, along with that goes Nevuah. Meaning when there's no Yitzud Avodah Zarah, there's no Nevuah either. The Seder Olam Rabbah says, Ad kan hayu neviim es nabruach hakodesh perek lamed mikan va'elach. Till the 40 years into Bayis Sheni there was Nevuah. After that, no longer. It says the Gra Pirish Misha Hargu es Yetzer Hara Batla HaNevuah. And I'm going to bring you some sources that say that once there's no Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah, there's no Nevuah either. The Sefer Hasidim says the same thing. There's no Ruach HaKodesh in the Bayis Sheni because Mipnei Bayis Sheni Nishchat Yetzer Avodah Zarah. If you want to understand this better, I recommend you to season 1, episode 9, called Interdependence of Prophecy and Idolatry, according to Tzaddik, and that's where I talk about why these two things go together. Okay, but the essential idea in a nutshell, well, not even in a nutshell, but a remnant to this, the Kuzari says, Shorish ha'amuna hu shorish ha'meri. The root of belief is also the root of meri, of rebelling against God, which means the following in a nutshell. If we believe that Hashem could be present here on earth, meaning to say we can model the world based on Hashem's midas, his attributes. So that's an amazing kind of vision, of my amazing way of living. That's the Shorish HaEmunah, that's the root of having Nevuah. It's also the root of Meri, because it allows for idolatry. Because if you get things wrong, you have the wrong model of divinity. But if you just say, Hashem is in Shemayim, forget about him, we can't bring him down to earth, then neither are we risking having other gods here on earth. That is in a nutshell. I don't want to go into it because it's not important for us now. It might get important at some point. We'll see if we get back to it. I just want to bring to you these great men, the Gra, the Sefer Hasidim, Tzaddik, Mashechach, I think too, and we can prove it from the Gemara, and I did that in that year in season 1, that when there's no longer Yitzud Avodah Zarah, there's no longer Nevuah. So then you have this Gemara in Yom Daf Tes that says, how come there's no Nevuah by Yeshua? Well, how do you mean how there's no Nevuah? Because you kill the Yitzud Avodah Zarah. When you kill the Yitzud Avodah Zarah, Nevuah goes with it. What's going on? What's going on? What's it all about? So here's the answer. We have to always dig a little deeper, right? You can't say, there's no Nevuah because no Yitzud Avodah Zarah. Well, why is no Yitzud Avodah Zarah? Why would they mevatel Yitzud Avodah Zarah? The Gemara says why. Because they said this is the reason why the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. We don't want right? We don't want it, and we don't want its reward. Which means, what that means is that they no longer wanted to battle the Yitzud Avodah Zarah. So they're giving up the fight, right? They're giving up the fight. What does it mean they're giving up the fight? They're not doing proper tshuva. Meaning, how do you do tshuva from that very? You go back, you go back to the very place, and this time you do it right. So they came back to Eretz Yisrael. And maybe this time they could battle the Yitzud Avodah Zarah and win. They said, no, you know what? Actually, we can't. Forget it. We can't. We realize we cannot. If we dabble in that kind of Yitzhak and that kind of relationship with God, we're going to end up in idolatry. We don't want that kind of relationship with Hashem. Right? Because it's going to happen in a job. That's what they said. Okay. So now let's go a little deeper. Why can't you do tshuva? Why don't you do tshuva? What do you need to do tshuva? What do you need in order to do tshuva? So I'll tell you what you need. And this is something we discussed in the past, and we're going to get back to it even. I think we're going to get back to this more. Everyone knows the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because Avodah Zarah was done. It's going on Yom Tes. But actually, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and we were exiled because of the Chet HaMeraglim. Right? The pasuk says, I'm jumping around over here a little bit in the source sheets. The pasuk says in Tehillim that at the time of the Meraglim, Hashem swore that we're going to be exiled, and the Gemara in Tanya says that. Okay, if you want to understand this better, there's season 1, episode 32, and episode 31. Episode 32 is showing how the original, the root of all sin is the Chet HaMeraglim. Meaning, on the one hand, it says clearly that the rejection of Eretz Yisrael is what led to the decree of exile. On the other hand, it's the Avodah Zarah that actually was done. Which one is it? The answer is very simple. Eretz Yisrael anchors Kol Torah Kula, which is what the Sefer Kuzari is arguing for. As we mentioned, the Rakavendin says that Eretz Yisrael is like the axle around which the whole theory, the whole idea of Sefer Kuzari revolves around Eretz Yisrael. And it's no surprise, because the relationship between Hashem and His people revolves around Eretz Yisrael. It begins Lech Lecha El Eretz Asher Harecha. So clearly, then, for some reason, and this is what I recommend you. We'll get to that soon, actually, a little bit. How you can find out what it's about. For some reason, Eretz Yisrael is at the center of all merit and sin. So if we embrace Eretz Yisrael correctly, then we're good. Then we mekayim the mitzvah of Lech Lecha Eretz Asher Harecha, and everything else follows automatically. When we rejected Eretz Yisrael with the Chet HaMeraglim, that led to Avodah Zarah Gila V'Hashich Dam. That's the root. The root of Avodah Zarah Gila V'Hashich Damim is not having the right connection with Eretz Yisrael. That's what the Kuzari is all about. So that means like this. So what would it take to do tshuva? Now that we know what we have to do tshuva from, right? Meaning we're coming back to Bayis Sheni and we say, look, we messed up. We did Avodah Zarah was done. And now, why did we mess up? Because we didn't have the proper understanding of Eretz Yisrael. That's the shirish of all the problems, the Meraglim. So why do you do tshuva? What do you do? How do you do tshuva? Well, can a nation, can a people shift their way of thinking about Eretz Yisrael? Maybe. If they get a new opportunity. If they get a new Lech Lecha, if they get a new national event, where they can start again in their understanding of Eretz Yisrael, then that's an opportunity for them to fix the root problem. And this time to do it right. Okay. And if they'll do it right, there's no need to kill the Yisrael, no need. Fix your problem, fix your root problem, and then you'll be able to actually resist the Yisrael and deal with it properly. So then the Machlokes, Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, to go deeper, is as follows. It's why did the Shechinah return to Bayis Sheni means like this. Why did they kill the Yisrael? What does that mean? Why didn't they have an opportunity to do things right? What does it mean to do things right? To do the Aretz right. So says Rish Lakish, they did have an opportunity to do the Aretz right, which they missed because they didn't come back to the Aretz. It's a Chet HaMeraglim all over again. According to Rish Lakish, Bayis Sheni was an opportunity to take back Eretz Yisrael and to this time do it the right way. If you do it the right way, then you are never going to do Avodah Zarah Shechus Damim, and that's the root of your whole Judaism. That's a very simple model according to Rish Lakish. They missed the opportunity, and that is the terrible chet. And therefore, they had to kill the Yisrael Avodah Zarah. That comes last, meaning they didn't do tshuva, the right kind of tshuva of coming back to Yisrael, meaning and doing it again, doing it right. So they had to kill the Yisrael Avodah Zarah. According to Rish Yochanan, when Rabbi Yochanan says, no, Shechinah is not returning anyways, that anyways means as follows. Means the opportunity, by the time they made the decision of whether they should all return or not, they were clearly not facing the Eretz Yisrael that would give them a new chance. Meaning Eretz Yisrael to give you a new chance, according to Rish Lakish, the new chance of Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz Yisrael that anchors called Torah Kula, it means the whole people coming back to Eretz Yisrael. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the Eretz Yisrael that anchors called Torah Kula is the whole people coming back to Eretz Yisrael and being independent from Kairish. So Rabbi Yochanan says, of course, if we have a chance to retake Eretz Yisrael and do it right, then we should do that. That's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Like Rish Lakish holds. But it happens to be, says Rabbi Yochanan, that wasn't a time where physically there was this possibility for doing tshuva and chet meraglim, or for redoing it so in the right way. So again, the machlokes of Rish Lakish is not really why is the Shechinah not Sheva. It's why didn't they do the right tshuva and instead they killed the Yisrael Zara. According to Rish Lakish, it's because they didn't. They didn't. They should have and they didn't. According to Rabbi Yochanan, by the time Bimei Ezra, when Koresh was in control, it wasn't actually a time where they had the opportunity to do that kind of tshuva. So it's like asking, why during Galus Bavel didn't they do the kind of tshuva to take Eretz Yisrael the right way? Well, they couldn't. And even when they came back, even when they had the opportunity to come back, it wasn't Eretz Yisrael in the way that would anchor Kol Torah Kula, because it's not an Eretz Yisrael with his independence from the Chet Meraglim. I'm sorry, with his independence from the Persians, which is the kind of Eretz Yisrael that Rabbi Yochanan holds we need in order to anchor Kol Torah Kula, and Eretz Yisrael with independence from the Goyim. So what that means is like this. What that means is Kulo Almu Moidu to the model of the Torah that the Kuzari puts forth, which is Taka tested in the Torah, that Eretz Yisrael is the anchor of the whole Torah, and that everything depends on us. Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, everyone agrees that as soon as we can do tshuva on our original sin of the Meraglim, of course we have to do it. Of course that's what Hashem is waiting for. Now there are times where we can't do it. Okay, but say if we can't take Eretz Yisrael, you can't do tshuva on that chet in the right way, by meaning the Meraglim had an opportunity to go to Eretz Yisrael and perceive Eretz Yisrael properly. The way we could redo it, it's not just theoretical. To think about it, okay, is to prepare for it. You could talk about it and think about it as preparing for it, but to actually redo our relationship to Eretz Yisrael, we have to redo it. B'payil. So that's what Yehuda Levi is saying. Once we could redo a b'payil, we should redo a b'payil, and everything's going to be wonderful. Which is exactly what Shlokish said happened in Sheni. Happens to Rabbi Yochanan knows that wasn't the time to do it, but that's not relevant. Because Rabbi Yochanan is also made to the model of Yehuda Levi, which is that as soon as it is possible for us to do something, we have to do it. If it's impossible, it's not a time where we could do tshuva, but be'etzem, what the Davar Alaki requires from us is to do something about it. Bein Rabbi Yochanan, Bein Rish Lakish made it to this. Happens to be Rish Lakish holds that was a time where we could do that. Happens to be Rabbi Yochanan holds it wasn't a time we could do that, and that because he goes like Rish Lakish because he holds like that, or because he might as well, because for his purposes, and he holds, Yehuda Levi holds, writing in the 12th century, he holds that it was a time that we could do it, because he obviously thinks we could at that time. Clearly he thinks so. And clearly one is tempted to say, I shouldn't say tempted, one is inclined to say that now is also a time that we can take Eretz Yisrael and do things right. Now, you want to know why is Eretz Yisrael so central? What is this all about? So for this, I recommend that you listen to the Book of Memories, the one that's coming out for Pasha Shlach. Really, really important, and what Eretz Yisrael is all about, and I will, bli neder, also get back to it in this series. So again, so that's why the Kuzari is assuming as an idea in Yiddishkeit that the Davar Lucky waits for us, because there's no debate about that. The only debate is whether that was a time where we had the potential. So what I'm saying is like this: Shlach L'cha Anoshim Suicide Canaan is the key pivotal moment in Klal Yisrael's religious history, and we're waiting for a time to do it right. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Levi is basically saying. As soon as the time is ripe to do it correctly, let's make sure to do it correctly. Rish Lakish holds it was a ripe time then by Sheni. Rabbi Yochanan holds it wasn't. But that has nothing to do with the point that the Yehuda Levi is making, which is that when it can be done, it must be done. Okay, so now that's it. We are completed. We're done talking about, for now, we're done, not for now, we're done, I think we're done talking about the dars that didn't go. And in a summary, basically, it's those who reject Eretz Yisrael then have to be away from Eretz Yisrael. They need time till they can do it, because Eretz Yisrael is supposed to do something to you. How much time is it? We said it's 1,000 years, but ultimately it all depends on the reality, which is captured in the Shavuos. L'maisa, halacha l'maisa for us, the Kuzari is very clear, and there's no question about it. Everything depends on us. What we have to understand more about is, what will Eretz Yisrael do for us? When are we ready for it? When not? How do How do we approach it the right way? Like I said, we're going to get back to this and talk more about the idea of Eretz Yisrael. I think at the end of this series, we'll give a bunch of shiurim dedicated to that. But meanwhile, listen to the Book of Memories. Parsha Shlach, please, very, very valuable conversation. And like I said, also season 1 of The Great Sources, episode 31 and 32, have a lot about it. For next year, I think I have to think about whether we have to talk about this sugya of Rebbe Shlokish anymore. There might be some more angles to discuss. I'm not sure. I have to think about that. Or if not, we're going to move on to the next question that we have to get to, which is the issue of mitzvahs hatluyas ba'aretz and the challenge that could pose for us bisman hazeh.